Mountains do not forgive assumption. They keep no memory and offer no appeal. Stone does not bend because men are brave inside it. It only keeps the angles it was given and lets the unprepared discover them at the cost of blood. Widow's Hollow lay 17 kilometers north of the border road, folded into the range like a scar that had closed badly. On a satellite image, it looked manageable. On contour paper, it looked hostile. On foot, it became arithmetic. Two ridgelines on the west, one broken shelf to the east, a basin floor that narrowed from 400 meters to 182, then opened again below a ruined Soviet pump station at grid 38 SMB, 44,172, 90,816. Every approach into it reduced choice. Every exit asked for time. By the time the rest of the team came out of the operations hut, Mara Vale had already been outside for 41 minutes. She sat on an upturned water can beside a HESCO wall, elbows on knees, a strip of acetate laid across a 125,000 topographic sheet. The red lens clipped under her collar threw a weak circle over the paper. 7 grease pencil marks ran along the ridges in a loose arc. None were random. Each sat on a point where stone, distance, elevation, and line of sight agreed with each other. Beside each mark, she had written a number. Not names, not guesses, distances, wind fractions, likely sectors. The kind of list men usually built after first contact, when someone had already been hit. She did not look up when the rotor crew started their checks. She listened instead. Fuel pump whine. Blade pitch change. One mechanic stepping heavier on his right leg than his left. A loose latch on a side compartment, tapping metal twice for every full turn of the rotor head. When the tapping stopped, she lifted a finger and drew a second, smaller circle near the eastern shelf. Dead ground. 46 meters wide, at its fattest point, invisible from 3 of the 7 marks. She capped the pencil, slid the acetate back into the map case. Then she wrote one more thing in a waterproof notebook no larger than her palm. Shelf holds if they panic. Nothing in her posture asked to be noticed. That was one of the first things Eli Mercer saw. He came through the door last. A long figure gone hard and dry with years, beard cut close, shoulders carrying the deliberate economy of a man whose joints had billed him for every mistake he had ever made. The others moved around him without crowding him. Respect does that when it has had time to settle into the room. 28 years in naval special warfare had reduced his movements to what mattered and stripped away whatever did not. He paused under the security light, watched Mara fold the notebook, watched her tap the spine twice before putting it away. That was not superstition. It was sequence control. A habit built when a missed step cost more than embarrassment. Mercer's gaze dropped to the map case in her lap. 7 circles. He said nothing to the group. He crossed the yard, poured coffee from a steel urn into a paper cup, and stopped beside her. "You plotted 7, he said. Mara looked up then. Her face gave him nothing theatrical. No challenge, no modesty either, just attention. "The ridges hold 7 clean hides," she said. "Maybe 8, if one of them accepts a bad angle." Mercer sipped once. "Most people see 3. Most people look for comfort first." One side of his mouth moved. Not a smile. Recognition, reduced to the smallest useful shape. Then he stepped away without another word, and the exchange ended there, which was precisely why it mattered. If this kind of story is your terrain, stay with it. Subscribe before the valley closes, and leave your location in the comments. I always like seeing how far these stories travel before they come back. The team brief began 8 minutes later, under a canvas awning strung against the outer wall. Lieutenant Commander Elias Vance stood at the folding table with his sleeves rolled once, no further, map board propped against a stack of ammunition crates. He was not loud. He did not need to be. Men quieted around him for the same reason they quiet around a clean rifle bolt closing in the dark. He made people feel that motion could be trusted. He was 39, broad through the chest, compact through the waist, with the kind of face that cameras rarely remembered because it was built for function instead of myth. His service ribbon row said enough for anyone who knew what they were looking at. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor device. 3 deployments that had not been public at the time and would not be public now. He was not reckless. He was not vain. Competence had worn off on him the way salt wears into rope. On the board, Widow's Hollow had been reduced to black lines and a grease pencil route. Objective is a face-to-face with Asset Harlan at the pump station, Vance said. Asset confirms movement ledger and relay schedules for 3 cross-border facilitation cells. Window is 21 minutes. We infill by MH60 to LZ Falcon. Displace south on foot. Enter the hollow from the northwest saddle. Link, verify. Exfil east to pick up Echo. Total ground time 94 minutes. We keep signature low. No vehicle noise. No air on station unless called. No one interrupted. They knew the cadence. Brief, confirm, move. Vance pointed with a marker cap. Mercer rear left. Pike point, Hanley on breach. Kim comms and medical. Ortega gun. Ross nav. Vale, you stay center stack and watch our sky picture through Kim's feed. There it was. Her official place in the file. Center stack. Attachment. Useful, but bounded. Mara kept her hands folded behind her back. Her rucksack leaned against the wall beside her boot. The zipper on its outer admin pocket was already opened to the exact point where her fingers could get inside it without looking. On the map, the route line crossed the basin floor at the narrowest point. She waited until Vance finished assigning contingencies. Then she spoke. The West Ridge sees that corridor from 640 to 810 meters, she said. The eastern shelf extends observation over the choke point for another 300. If someone wants to turn the basin into intersecting lanes, that crossing is where they build it. Pike shifted his weight before Vance did. He was younger than Mercer by almost 2 decades and carried himself like a man who had spent enough years being right that certainty had become a reflex. He was very good at the work immediately in front of him. Doors, angles, violence at short distance. The world had rewarded him for directness often enough that he had started to mistake it for completeness. Vance looked at Mara. Source? Terrain? Ridge geometry? Wind exposure? Entry discipline on the northern saddle? No shepherd traffic on the last 2 pattern images? No fresh cut lines? No animal scatter on the approach? Somebody's been managing that ground. The others glanced toward the map. Not because her tone was emotional, because it wasn't. Pike exhaled through his nose. That's a long chain from goat paths to a kill box. Mara did not turn to him. Vance nodded once, not dismissively, simply processing. You recommending? Delay 6 hours. Refresh overhead. Or split approach. Put eyes on the west line before we commit 8 bodies to the floor. Negative on delay. Asset window collapses. Negative on split. We don't have numbers for independent elements without bleeding the center. Mara inclined her head once. That could have been the end of it. But there are concerns men raise for themselves, and concerns they raise because not raising them would be professional negligence. The hollow is wrong for a meeting, she said. If I were building an ambush there, I'd place 7 rifles. 2 west high, 3 west mid, 2 east shelf. Initiation shot from the southern west spur. That gives them visual confirmation on anyone moving to cover, and 2 separate angles on the casualty pull. For a moment, no one spoke. Pike looked at her, then looked at the map, then back to her, and the social instinct to puncture tension got there before caution did. Good thing you're not building ambushes for a living, he said. A few mouths twitched, not because the joke was strong, because groups release pressure where they can. Mara rested her thumb against the seam of her index finger. Once, twice. She kept her eyes on the board. Mercer watched that small motion. File it, store it, use it later if it mattered. Vance capped the marker, noted, "We're still moving." She reached into the admin pouch, removed the acetate sheet, and laid it flat on the corner of the folding table. 7 circles stared up through the red light. Distances, holdovers, predicted sectors. A second, thinner line traced the eastern dead ground she had marked alone by the wall. "This is my concern through proper channels," she said. "No challenge in it, no tone, just the administrative cleanliness of a person making sure the record had an edge." Vance looked down at the overlay, longer this time. That mattered too. He was not brushing her off, he was measuring the cost of changing a plan against the cost of keeping it. "Copy," he said at last. "Leave it with Kim for archive." Pike leaned in enough to see the circles. "You draw that from a chair?" Mara slid the acetate back before Kim could take it. "From contour intervals." Pike gave a short laugh. Same thing from where I stand. She did not answer. Same pace, same breathing, same face. That was the public moment. Small enough that anyone outside the unit would have missed it. But teams are built from weight distribution, not headline events. The room felt where the pressure had gone. So did Vance. So did Mercer. There had once been another young operator in another city, years earlier, who had stood with a notebook in his hand and told Mercer a route had a secondary device line running through it. The kid had been precise. Too precise for his age, which should have been warning enough. Mercer had not spoken hard enough, soon enough. The patrol had rolled anyway. 6 minutes later, the secondary took the man behind them. Not the kid, the man behind him. Failure does not always kill the person who identified the danger. Sometimes it kills the one standing close enough to inherit the oversight. That was why Mercer crossed the yard after the brief and stopped Mara as she checked her sling. "Who taught you terrain?" he asked. She tightened the strap, looked at the buckle, and tested it once. A man who hated optimism. Good teacher. He buried 3 better students. Mercer nodded. That answer did more than a biography could have done. "Keep your map dry," he said. It sounded ordinary. It was not. The flight to LZ Falcon took 11 minutes at low altitude, skimming black rock and hard scrub, while the sky turned from iron to diluted ash. Inside the cabin, the team sat knee to knee in the noise, helmets touching seatbacks, rifles tucked in close. No one wasted movement. Hanley checked det cord twice without opening the pouch. Ross ran a gloved finger along the contour line on his laminated strip map. Ortega rested one palm on the feed tray of his light machine gun, the way some men rest a hand on a dog's neck before a hunt. Mara sat between Kim and the airframe, chin slightly lowered, eyes closed for 17 seconds while the helicopter banked east. She was not praying. She was building a 3-dimensional picture against the vibration. Turn radius, wind correction, flight profile. When she opened her eyes, she drew a tiny arrow on her glove with a pencil nub. Crosswind had shifted. Kim noticed. He noticed everything electrical and almost nothing social, which was part of why he was useful. He was Korean American, quiet to the point of disappearance when groups were talking over each other, but his hands were exact and his timing rarely failed. Most people mistook silence for absence. That mistake had cost more than one man a clean answer from Kim when the answer mattered. He tilted his head toward the mark on her glove. "You still think 7?" Mara looked at the closed side door, then at the vibration in a loose strap near the floor. "Now, I think one of them moves 40 meters south, for wind." Kim absorbed that without expression. After a beat, he nodded once. Receipt taken. The helicopter settled in a shelf of dirt and stone, south of a collapsed shepherd wall. LZ Falcon was too small for comfort and too exposed for liking, but it worked. The team spilled, crouched, peeled, and moved off the landing point before the rotor wash had finished flattening the scrub. Once the aircraft was gone, the silence returned so abruptly it seemed engineered. Mountains did not become quiet when men left. They merely stopped being interrupted. The first kilometer ran over loose shale and broken terraces. Pike held point with the confidence of a man who had walked enough bad ground to trust his knees more than his eyes. Ross managed the line behind him, checking azimuth, counting paces between landmarks, keeping the file from drifting. Vance stayed 2 positions back, where he could see enough of the element to control it without choking it. Mercer floated where experience told him he was most expensive. Sometimes that was rear security. Sometimes it was beside the least seasoned man. Sometimes it was nowhere obvious at all. Mara walked center stack, as ordered. Obedience, when chosen, can hide more intelligence than refusal. She did not waste effort scanning everything. She scanned what mattered. Stone displaced uphill instead of down. One fresh scrape under a thorn bush at knee height. A flattened cigarette foil buried under dust against a rock face where prevailing wind should have taken it east, not west. Someone had sat there recently, long enough to leave almost nothing. At the top of the northwest saddle, the ground opened, and Widow's Hollow showed itself all at once. It was wider than men expected, and narrower than they wanted. The basin floor angled down in pale rubble toward the pump station ruins, then kinked, left around a field of black volcanic outcrop. West ridges rose in overlapping teeth. The eastern shelf lay lower, broken, deceptive. From above, it offered concealment. From below, it offered murder. Pike dropped to a knee and glassed. No movement. Mercer glassed longer, and said nothing. Vance raised binos. Ortega covered south. Kim knelt over the tablet feed linked to a small quad drone already circling 2 kilometers out, its camera stitching a thin grayscale picture through intermittent signal noise. The ridges on the screen looked harmless. Most kill zones do from a safe altitude. Mara crouched and set her palm flat on the ground. Heat. Not much, but enough. Stone retained the night differently, where it had been shaded and where it had been touched. On the west spur, 300 meters out and 60 above the basin, a rectangle of rock carried a slightly different sheen than the slope around it. She saw it without glass, because she had seen its absence first. A flat patch, where gravel should have been random, cleared. She lifted 2 fingers toward Vance. "Wait!" He turned a fraction. She pointed with her chin, not her hand. West spur, upper lip, 20 meters below the split boulder. Vance followed the line through binos. He held it 4 seconds, saw nothing, then saw the thing that wasn't supposed to be there. A thread of matte cloth where stone should have flashed. He lowered the glasses. Not alarmed. Not yet. Mara leaned in close enough that only he and Mercer could hear. Initiation point. Mercer's eyes never left the ridge. "I see it." Vance kept his voice level. "Could be old cover." Mara looked across the basin to the eastern shelf. "Then we have a dead man who stacked it with current discipline." The team did not hear that exchange. They heard only the next order. "Move," Vance said. "Same interval." That was the nature of command under incomplete information. A single suspicious sign is rarely enough to abort an operation on its own. Rational men require thresholds. The danger of certain terrain is that the threshold arrives all at once. They descended the saddle in file. 100 meters, 150, 200. The first shot came at a distance of 683 meters from the southern west spur, exactly where Mara had said initiation should come from if someone had built the basin for intersecting fire. It cracked over the valley like dry timber splitting. Ross dropped flat by instinct. Pike snapped left. Ortega turned into the sound with the gun already climbing. Dust kicked from a rock 6 inches behind Hanley's heel, then a second shot from farther north. Then 2 more, offset, one west, one east, the geometry declaring itself in real time. "We're surrounded by snipers," Pike said on the net. Stripped of mockery now. He did not shout it. Men with training usually don't. Training does not remove fear. It narrows its output. Vance's voice came back on the channel, calm and unhurried. "Contact front, west and east ridges. Break right. 30 meters. Use stone, not scrub. Ortega suppress west mid. Kim smoke east shelf on my mark. Move." That calm bought them options. They moved. Not cleanly, not gracefully, but together. Hanley dragged Ross behind a basalt tooth and nearly lost his ruck in the process. Ortega went prone behind a shale hump and began feeding controlled bursts uphill, not to kill, not yet, but to subtract certainty from anyone looking down a scope. Pike crossed 10 meters of open stone under 2 snapping rounds and hit cover hard enough to skin his wrist through the glove. Mercer never appeared to run, yet somehow arrived at the better rock first. Kim popped smoke low and mean, keeping it close to the ground where the air currents would drag it across the eastern sightline, instead of lifting it uselessly into the open sky. Mara did not dive into the first available cover. She ran 3 steps past it, cut left, and dropped behind a broken slab with sight on both the west line and the eastern shelf. Choice, not panic. The distinction mattered. Stone had no mechanism for mercy. It had one function here, to reward accurate placement. A bullet shaved dust from the edge near her cheek. Another struck lower and split stone into bright fragments. She ignored both and watched the intervals. Shot 1, west spur. Long pause. Shot 2, west mid-north. Shorter. Shot 3, east shelf low. Different report. Dragunov pattern, not bolt. Shot 4, west high split boulder. Almost simultaneous with a missed correction from the first rifle. The team had not been surrounded. Not exactly. They had been measured. Mara pulled her notebook from the admin pouch and flipped to the page she had written before dawn. 7 numbers, 7 sectors. She added 3 ticks beside the first 3 marks, then a 4th beside the upper boulder position. Mercer slid in beside her long enough to see the page. Bullets kept finding stone above them. He looked from the notebook to the ridge and back again. You already had them. Most of them. Most. The seventh hasn't spoken. That was the moment he understood. The gap in the paperwork was not clerical. Across the basin, Vance had pulled the team into a ragged cluster of partial cover, centered on a basalt rise, no wider than a pickup truck. It was not good cover, it was survivable, which inside a live basin was a meaningful distinction. He keyed the net again. Sound off. Voices came back in clipped order. Pike, Hanley, Ortega, Ross, breathless but unhit, Kim, Mercer. Then, Mara. Up. Vance glanced toward her position. She was not pressed flat. She was kneeling, notebook open, rifle resting but not aimed, head tilted as if she were listening to weather instead of bullets. Another shot, this one low, from the eastern shelf. It struck inches above Vance's right shoulder and sprayed grit across his collar. There it was. Not random, a shooter had chosen him. One round can be a warning. 2 rounds on the same man are intention. Mara looked at the impact scar, then at Vance's position relative to the stone around him. The eastern shooter was not chasing movement. He was bracketing command. Vance, she said over the net, as calm as if she were asking for a pen. Your tracker is east shelf, 2 o'clock high, 612. He's correcting from your shoulder line. Move left 40 centimeters and stay low. Vance moved exactly that distance, without asking how she knew. The next round passed through the air where his head had been. Pike heard that and looked across the rocks toward her. For the first time since the brief, he was not seeing an attachment. Mara flattened the notebook under her forearm and unzipped a side pocket on her ruck. Inside was a compact weather meter, a laser rangefinder, and a folded range card so worn at the edges it had been used far from this valley. She took the meter reading one-handed under fire, shielding the vein with her body. Crosswind, 6.1 meters per second, quartering from west by northwest. Not new, just confirmed. She keyed the net. 7 rifles. 4 confirmed west, 2 east, 1 quiet south lip. West spur is initiator. East low is tracking Vance. West high split boulder has best angle on casualty pull. Do not move to the black outcrop at basin center. It's pre-sighted from 2 lines. There was a 2-second silence afterward, which in contact is a long time. Not because anyone doubted the words, because of how complete they were. Pike finally said, "How would you know that?" Mara had already shifted her rifle and was glassing through a low-power optic. "Because if I were them, I'd have built it that way." Another round cracked. This time it hit near Ross, whose breathing rose audibly on the channel. Vance stayed steady. Recommendations. At last. Not authority surrendered. Authority widened. Mara took 3 seconds to verify before answering. She watched the smoke Kim had laid, saw it drag lower along the shelf, exactly as expected. Ortega keeps west mid-blind. Hanley throws smoke 10 meters farther east, not on us, on the shelf break. Kim patches drone feed to my tablet. Mercer shifts Pike 5 meters south to fake casualty movement. That will pull west high. On the second correction, I'll give you the rest. Pike opened his mouth, likely to ask why she was giving instructions into a SEAL element she did not command. Mercer cut him off before the sound fully formed. Move south, Mercer said. It was not loud. It was final. Pike moved. That was the first private signal made public. Kim slid under 2 rocks and a hail of gravel to reach Mara's position. Tablet clutched close to his vest. He tucked in beside her and patched the feed across with a short cable, hands moving quick and exact. She did not look at him when she spoke. Battery? 72%. Signal loss? Every 11 seconds on the orbit. Can you shave the loop? Kim adjusted 3 settings. 9. Do it. He did. No one else on the team could have managed that under fire with that tablet and that drone feed. Technical actions rarely look heroic from the outside. Their cost is hidden in the alternative. Mara laid the tablet flat on the dust. Grainy grayscale ridges swam into shape. She placed the range card over half the screen and matched stone forms to the marks she had drawn before dawn. West spur, west high split boulder, west mid-north cut, west mid-south alcove, east low shelf, east upper notch, Quiet south lip still absent. That made 6. Then Pike shifted south, at Mercer's order, exposing exactly 23 centimeters of helmet and shoulder around the slab edge. The West High rifle took the bait. The flash was faint. The report came late. The round struck a handspan over Pike's cover. Mara marked the 6th confirmed position with a pencil stab. "Now I have him," she said. Vance crawled to her rock under Mercer's cover and dropped beside the tablet. He did not crawl like an officer proving he could. He crawled like a man who needed the information more than he needed the posture. Dust striped his sleeves. A chip of basalt had cut the skin along one knuckle. He ignored it. "What do you need?" he asked. Mara turned the range card toward him. 7 circles, 7 sectors, notes in block print, wind holds, estimated fields of fire, a fallback route traced along the eastern dead shelf, hidden from 3 positions and partially masked from the other 4 by the basin's own fold. At the bottom of the card, written hours earlier, were 4 words. "If pinned, move east shelf." Vance read it once. Then again. "You drew this before wheels up." "Yes." "How long have you had this valley worked?" "Since I saw the objective packet." "Why wasn't this in the brief?" "It was." She tapped the acetate folded beneath the tablet. The room preferred probability over structure. Mercer arrived on Vance's other side. He took one look at the range card and said nothing. But memory moved across his face, brief and old. Vance looked at Mara, as if seeing the file behind the file for the first time. "Who are you, Vale?" She reached into the admin pocket, pulled out a sealed black sleeve, and handed it to him. Inside was a thinner folder than he expected, and heavier than paper should have felt. Interim assignment orders, review status, access endorsements, 2 pages, 1 redacted block, 1 unredacted line that made the rest of the basin seem, for a moment, very far away. Attached pending review, Senior Counter Sniper Integration Lead, Task Force Paladin. Below it, another line, Qualification Authority, Joint Precision Fires, Advanced Targeteering, Counter Ambush Terrain Analysis. Vance looked back at the name tape on her carrier, as if it might explain why the woman listed in his packet as Temporary Fires Liaison was carrying a background no liaison should possess. Her apparent station and her actual capability had not merely been misaligned, they had been intentionally obscured. A round slapped the top of the rock and sprayed them with grit. Mara took the folder back, resealed it, and tucked it away. "Later," she said. "Right now, the quiet rifle is south lip, 100 meters off the spur. He hasn't fired because he's holding your exit lane." "How sure?" "Certain enough to bet your body on it." Another pause. This was the point where bad leaders double down, because changing course feels like losing ownership. Good leaders know ownership was never the point. The work was. Vance turned his head and looked over the valley with new information in his hands and old responsibility still on his shoulders. Men were pinned, angles were closing. The initial plan had met exactly the problem she had flagged. Authority, if it was real, had to become adaptive, or it became vanity. He took a full beat to process the preparation in front of him, the pre-drawn sectors, the contingency route, the credentials, the calm. Then he made the harder decision. "Mercer," he said, voice flat and clean. "You hear this?" "I do." "Kim?" "Copy." "Pike, Ortega, Hanley, Ross, hold for redirect." He looked at Mara again. No ceremony, no apology in the middle of fire, just the operational intelligence of a man stepping back because the mission required a better shape than his ego. "You have the valley," he said. The words landed across the net, like a switch being thrown inside steel. Pike froze for half a second behind his rock, not from resistance, but from recalibration. Ross stopped breathing through his mouth and started listening. Kim's eyes went once to Mara's hands, waiting for sequence. Mercer lowered himself tighter behind cover and gave the smallest nod anyone there would ever get from him. Mara did not absorb the moment. She used it. "Ortega," she said, "shift your fire 8 degrees north, 5-round bursts. Every 4 seconds. Don't chase impacts." "Copy." "Hanley, 2 smoke cans. First on my mark to east shelf break at 600. Second 12 meters beyond. Build a false lane, not a wall." "Copy." "Pike, you're going to hate this." Show them your shoulder again in 3 seconds. Same angle, same height. He did not argue this time. Copy. Ross. When I say move, you move Mercer's line to the eastern dead shelf. No bunching, 2-meter interval. Copy. Kim. Keep drone orbit tight and give me freeze frame on the east notch when the first smoke blooms. Copy. Vance. You stay exactly where the east rifle believes you are, until I break him of that habit. Vance settled lower behind the stone. Understood. There was no rush in her voice. No performance. Quiet intensity is colder than panic because it spends nothing it does not need. The first burst from Ortega hammered uphill and tore dust from the west mid-cut. Hanley pulled a smoke can, checked the spoon once, and sent it arcing toward the eastern break. Pike rolled enough shoulder into view to tempt the rifle above him. Kim thumbed the feed into tighter orbit. Mercer shifted half his weight onto the balls of his feet, ready to move at the first word. Across the basin, one of the 7 rifles made its choice, and Mara Vale, who had arrived in the file as an attachment, began to build the sequence that would kill the trap without raising her voice. The second smoke can landed beyond the first and began to spread low along the shelf exactly the way Mara had wanted, not thick enough to hide movement completely, just dense enough to corrupt confidence. That was the distinction men on the ridges hated most. Not blindness, doubt. Pike showed his shoulder. The West High rifle took the shot again. The flash winked at the split boulder, faint as a blink. Mara had already moved her optic there. She counted the recoil delay, watched the dust signature, and marked the rock beneath it rather than the muzzle itself. Shooters hid rifles. Rifles still pushed stone. West High confirmed, she said. Ortega, 3 rounds left of my trace. She leaned from cover for less than a second and sent a single round into the boulder face. 2 hands left of the hide. Not to hit, to point. Ortega's machine gun answered at once. 3 hard impacts shattered the lip and drove a plume of pale fragments across the hide. The rifle there went silent. 1 down was not a victory. It was an accounting change. Hanley, Mara said, cut east 2 meters and get ready to move with Ross. Mercer, you'll anchor their rear. Vance, keep talking on the net. Vance glanced at her. Why? The east shelf shooter is married to your voice. He did not ask for explanation. He keyed the net and began issuing false movement control in the same measured tone he had used from first contact, painting a picture for anyone listening uphill. Prepare to break west on my command. Ortega, hold 2 seconds. Pike, ready smoke center. The basin took the bait exactly as she had expected. The eastern low rifle shifted early, searching for the command element to lead a westward escape. A round snapped into the wrong lane and struck open stone 15 meters from where no one would now be going. There, Mara said. He moved. Kim froze the drone frame. Through grayscale distortion, a dark seam under the shelf sharpened into the outline of a man pressed behind a stone rib. Not clean. Enough. Distance, Mara said. Kim checked the overlay. 614. She adjusted half a mil and fired once. The rifle under the shelf did not answer again. Pike looked across at her from behind his rock, as if distance itself had changed shape. Mara did not look back. That breaks Vance's tracker. Do not thank me yet. The West Spur initiator fired again, impatient now, trying to force the pinned element into movement before the geometry collapsed. The round struck near Ross and bounced whining into the basin floor. Impatient, Mercer muttered. He just lost his eastern pair, Mara said. He'll hurry. Mountains favored men who could wait, but ambushes had their own metabolism. Every kill zone begins decaying the moment the first shot fails to produce panic at scale. Surprise burns quickly. Ammunition diminishes. Confidence narrows. Hidden shooters start solving for losses instead of possibilities. Mara unfolded the range card fully and laid it between herself, Mercer, and Vance. We still have 5 active. West Spur Initiator, West Mid-North Cut, West Mid-South Alcove, South Lip Quiet Rifle, East Upper Notch. East Upper will peel if we move shelf. South Lip is saving his lane for the exit. West Mid is the real problem. They own the basin floor. Vance tracked the lines with his finger. And? Your answer? She drew a short diagonal with her pencil from their current cover to the eastern dead shelf, then farther down to a split in in the rubble where the basin kinked around the black outcrop field. We never cross the floor. We disappear from the west line one file at a time inside the smoke drag. We move low along the shelf fold. At the bend, we'll have reverse angle on east upper and partial on the south lip. Once those two break, west mid loses crossfire. Then Ortega and Pike can climb enough to collapse the west line from below. Pike heard his name and keyed in. You want us to climb into snipers? I want you to climb where they cannot depress cleanly without exposing themselves. It is not the same thing. Silence. Then Mercer spoke into the net. Do what she says. Mercer had not spent 28 years lending his voice to bad ideas. The statement carried more than rank. It carried weight accrued in places too hard to explain. The team felt that. Copy, Pike said. Mara looked once toward the eastern shelf with the naked eye. Smoke was dragging low, snagging on broken stone, making moving air visible. It showed her the eddies. It showed her the seams. It showed her the route. Move on my count, she said. Ross first. Hanley second. Kim, Vance, Pike, Ortega. Mercer last. Keep 2 meters and keep your heads below the shelf line. If someone gets hit, they crawl, not stand. The standing part of you is what they want. She raised 3 fingers, folded one, folded another, then dropped the last. The file moved. Ross slid out first, belly to stone, boots pushing small avalanches of grit that died under the smoke. Hanley followed with his carbine tucked high and his chin almost scraping the ground. Kim kept one hand on the tablet, one on the rock, moving with a careful, unshowy efficiency that wasted nothing. Vance went next, broader than the others, still somehow making himself small. Pike came through with less grace and more speed. Ortega crabbed backward for 2 meters before turning to drag the machine gun by its sling and foregrip. Mercer waited until all of them had cleared the first break, then peeled out last exactly as ordered, because senior men, who understand sequence, do not improvise for vanity. Mara covered the line without firing. Her rifle muzzle tracked the west ridge. Her eyes tracked everything else. A round from west mid-south cut through the smoke too high. Another from the initiator missed short, striking stone where Ross had been 4 seconds earlier. The shooters were firing on expectation now, not sight. That meant the valley was beginning to belong to someone else. At the first shelf fold, Vance tucked in behind a jag of basalt and looked back upslope. Their original rock cluster already seemed distant, a problem belonging to another set of men. Widow's Hollow had not changed. Their relationship to it had. Mara came off the last piece of cover and slid in beside them. Her sleeve was dust gray to the elbow. A smear of blood marked the side of her neck, where a fragment had nicked her, shallow and irrelevant. Status, she said. They answered in order. All up. Ross had taken grit in one eye. Hanley's left glove was torn. Ortega had lost one spare belt link. Kim's tablet was intact. No penetrating injuries, no broken movement. That was the first time Pike looked at her without any residue of the yard in it. You had this route before we landed, he said. Yes. How many more routes? 3. He absorbed that. Not humiliation now, just a man discovering the size of a room he had walked into too quickly. Ahead, the shelf narrowed along a tilted seam of pale stone, and then broadened again behind a rib of rock that rose toward the east upper notch. From there, Mara would be able to cut the remaining eastern shooter off his retreat or his fire lane, depending on which he valued more. She held 2 fingers toward Kim. Drone up another 10 meters. Keep orbit. I need the notch. Kim made the adjustment. The feed wavered, stabilized, then sharpened enough to show the east upper hide as a dark crease between 2 standing stones. No clear body, just shadow and the angled line of a rifle barrel withdrawing, then reappearing. The shooter was disciplined, not frozen, recalculating. He knows the shelf is compromised, Mara said. He'll displace south to keep eyes on us or north to survive. If he goes south, Pike gets him. If he goes north, I do. Why not now? Pike asked. Because a man moving is easier to predict than a man waiting. That answer seemed to settle something in him that argument would not have touched. Mercer angled his head toward the basin behind them. West line is holding fire. They're listening, Mara said. No one on the floor. No impacts. No panic. They're deciding whether we broke east or went dead. Vance glanced at the line of his team, then at Mara. Command had not left him, it had changed shape. He was now the man preserving the conditions that let the right person work. "What do you need from me?" Your voice, once more. He keyed the net on local transmit only, loud enough that a patient rifleman with the right receiver on the ridge might catch fragments. Mercer, ready collapse south. Pike, on me. Ortega, hold till I mark. It was a false push toward the basin center, and it worked. The east upper notch rifle shifted south, barrel nosing out to catch movement that would never come. Mara fired once. The notch emptied. The barrel slipped away and did not return. "East line broken," she said. Now the quiet one, the south lip shooter, had not fired at all. That made him the most dangerous of the remaining three. Restraint under pressure often marks the best man on a ridge. He had been saved for the exit, for the moment a team thought it had solved the basin and rose into what looked like freedom. Mara pointed with 2 fingers toward a fold below them. "We go another 40 meters. Then no one speaks." Pike frowned. "How are we coordinating?" She looked at him once. The old way. The old way meant hands, shoulders, eye contact, a plan small enough to fit inside breath. They moved to the next fold and crouched under a shelf lip that hid them from the west ridge entirely. The basin beyond was visible only in slices. Enough. Mara took a grease pencil and drew on a flat stone between them. 3 marks on the west, 1 on the south lip, 2 arrows, 1 pause, 1 cross. Then she tapped each man's chest in sequence. Pike, south movement. Ortega, suppress west, mid-north on signal. Hanley, smoke south lip only if the quiet rifle fires. Kim, keep drone and feed. Mercer, watch the rear and the west mid-south alcove. Vance, control no one, hold everyone to the count. Ross, stay attached to Mercer and do not freelance. Then she tapped herself and drew a short line curving beneath the ridge fold toward a jumble of black stone below the shelf. That was where she would go, alone. Vance caught her wrist before she moved. "Not hard enough." "No?" She waited. "That puts 1 person off the line with 4 rifles active. 3? East upper is done. 3, then?" "Yes." "No." There was no ego in it. Only the weight of losing people to necessary risks and trying, on instinct, to keep another one inside the perimeter of command. Mara held his gaze. "You asked what I need from you." He said, "Nothing. I need you not to stop the part you hired without knowing you hired it." Quiet stretched under the shelf. Dust drifted through a blade of light and vanished. Mercer spoke before Vance did. "Let her work." Vance looked at the older man. Something passed there. Not agreement won, trust borrowed. Then he released her wrist. She nodded once and slid away. She moved down the black stone fold without wasted speed. Body low, rifle tucked, left hand testing each placement before committing weight. It was not dramatic. Good movement under observation never is. It looks almost disappointingly plain until one tries to do it with rounds waiting. The black stone field near the basin bend was broken into fins and shoulders, each tall enough to hide a crouched body, each narrow enough to punish a careless angle. It was precisely the kind of ground a patient sniper hated to lose track of because it turned certainty into fragments. Mara settled behind a fin that gave her a sliver view of the south lip and half the western line. She waited with the stillness of an animal that has chosen not to run because running would simplify the world for the predator. A minute passed. Then another. Stone did not mind time. Men did. The west mid-north rifle tested the shelf with a probing shot that struck above Ortega's former lane. No response. The south lip still held fire. The initiator on the west spur sent another round toward the basin center, confirming he still believed command might try to force a central break. He was good enough to remain dangerous, and pressured enough to become useful. Mara watched the south lip through 10-power magnification, and did not look directly at the hide. She watched the shadow line beneath it. Human beings notice movement best when it breaks expectation at the edge. A millimeter of darkness changed shape under the lip. A scope shifted. A cheek weld adjusted. The rifleman on the south lip was leaning to rebuild his lane around the shelf. There, Mara lifted 2 fingers above the stone where only Pike, watching through the fold, could see them. Pike moved exactly as briefed. No radio, no words. He showed a slice of shoulder along the shelf line, 30 meters north of where anyone actually planned to move. The quiet rifle fired at last. Hanley's smoke can was already in the air. The shot passed through the gap, wrong by half a body. Smoke hit the south lip and burst across the hide. In the same breath, Ortega opened on west mid-north, Mercer put a round into the west mid-south alcove, and Mara rose just high enough over the black fin to see through the dissolving edge of Hanley's smoke. She did not fire fast. Fast was for correction. Precision was for ending. First shot. South lip. The rifle vanished sideways. She shifted left 7 degrees. Second shot. Initiator on the west spur. Caught while leaning to see what had happened to the exit lane he had been holding in reserve. A beat. Breathe. Wind. Third shot. West, mid-south alcove. Not center mass. The visible elbow driving the rifle. The weapon dropped. Mercer's second round hit the stone above the same hide a fraction later and sealed the position down. Ortega's suppression walked north by design. Pike used it, climbing 2 body lengths up the fold, to angle into west mid-north, from below the rifle's own depression limit. The shooter there tried to swing. Pike killed him before the swing completed. Then the valley went quiet. Not safe. Quiet. There is a difference. Good teams know it in their bones. No one moved for 5 full seconds. Mara kept the optic on the south lip, then the west spur, then the broken alcove. Ortega held his gun trained uphill with the patience of a man who had carried belts long enough to know that dead ground often invites premature confidence. Mercer watched for a tertiary line, the sort of insurance-experienced ambushers sometimes place behind their own shooters. Kim kept the drone orbiting, scanning wider. Vance counted under his breath and did not let relief enter the net. At 11 seconds, Mara said, "Hold." At 26 seconds, she said, "Kim, widen search to the northern saddle and southern runout." Kim worked the controls. The drone climbed, banked, swept the flanks. No displacers, no secondary team, no vehicle dust, no exfil motorcycles tucked under the shelf, just the dead geometry of the ridges and the 7 positions that had stopped speaking. "Nothing moving," Kim said. Mara rose into a crouch. "Now we clear." The climb to the first western position took time and care. Ambush sites often keep gifts for the men who reclaim them. Hanley led the clearance with Pike on his shoulder, and Mercer offset for cross-cover. They found the west spur shooter, half under his hide screen, rifle still trapped beneath him, radio handset cracked against the stone. The hide had been built with skill, shade cloth cut to rock pattern, firing slot pre-measured, spent brass collected in a folded cloth pouch to deny glint and trace. These were not amateurs. They had planned correctly. They had simply built their trap against someone who could read it from the ground up. At the split boulder position above, Ortega found the first shooter, half buried in his own shattered stone. At west mid-south, Mercer kicked the rifle clear before checking the body. Broken elbow. Mara's shot had taken the joint exactly as intended. Mercer looked down the slope toward the black fin where she had fired from and gave a small exhale through his nose. It was not surprise anymore. It was respect reaching its mature form. The eastern shelf yielded 2 more bodies and a coil of comms wire run into a crevice radio relay. The south lip position was the most carefully constructed of all. Narrow scrape. Excellent exit path. Food wrappers buried under rock. A secondary rifle bolt wrapped in oiled cloth. The man there had expected to survive the day. Pike came up behind Mara while she studied the hide. The wind moved over the lip and carried the smell of disturbed dust, cold steel, and smoke residue. He stood with his helmet in one hand and his carbine hanging quiet. "In the yard," he said. "I was wrong." Mara kept looking at the scrape. Yes. No edge. No softness. Just the fact. Pike breathed once, maybe expecting more. None came. He nodded. Understood. That was the beginning of accountability, though he did not yet know it. They recovered maps, range cards, radios, 1 foreign-made laser designator, and a handwritten trigger sketch of the basin floor that matched Mara's pre-drawn sectors with unnerving closeness. The enemy planner had seen the valley the same way she had. That is one of the less comforting truths in warfare. Competence is not moral property. It appears wherever discipline is tolerated long enough to become method. At the seventh and final hide, Mercer stopped over a folded paper tucked under a flat stone. It held a rough body count estimate for the American element. 8 silhouettes, 7 rifles, 1 boxed note in the margin indicating target priority. Command first, gun second, comms third, then collapse the rest by movement. Whoever had built the trap understood teams well enough to know they were never 8 separate men. They were a system. Break the right joints and the body falls. Mercer passed the paper to Vance. Vance read it, looked across the valley toward the path they would have taken had they stayed with the original route. Then he folded the paper very neatly and put it in a waterproof evidence sleeve. No one said what the paper meant. Men who work with lethal arithmetic do not need every sum spoken aloud. They reached the pump station late. Asset Harlan was dead before they arrived. Throat cut, body tucked beneath the collapsed pump housing as if the killers had not wanted him visible from the air. The ledger he had promised was gone. In its place they found a cheap field notebook with 2 pages torn and a 3rd page left behind on purpose. A single grid coordinate sat on it. Not their next pickup. Another site entirely. A relay cache 9 kilometers east, in dry wadis beyond the shelf country. Ross stared at the coordinate. This was bait all the way down. Not all the way, Mara said. She crouched beside the notebook and looked at the pressure marks on the paper. The page beneath the written coordinate had taken partial impressions from what had once been written above it and removed. She angled it toward the light and rubbed dust gently across the surface with her thumb, bringing out broken grooves. Vance knelt beside her. What is it? They tore the useful page too quickly. She traced the indentations. There was a second line. Can you read it? Most of it. She took a pencil and sketched the recovered pressure strokes into her notebook, filling the probable letters from repetition patterns she had seen in field ledgers before. Route, delay, transfer after contact. The men who had sprung the hollow had not merely set an ambush, they had built it to protect movement elsewhere. Widow's Hollow was the knife. The relay cache was the hand holding it. Kim leaned in. You can pull that from pressure. If the hand was in a hurry, what does it say? Mara read the reconstructed line once, checked it again, then answered. Transfer at the east cache after contact. 43 minutes. Vance looked at the sky, then at his watch, then back at the page. How long since first contact? 31 minutes, Mara said. The second threat arrived with the quiet force of a door unlatching in another room. They had survived the basin. The real cargo, whatever it was still moving. Pike swore softly under his breath, not from panic now, but from the clean insult of being used as delay. Vance stood. His next decision had to be made in a world altered twice in 1 hour, and he made it the way competent men do when they understand that the best available mind may not be theirs on every problem. Can we make the East Cache? Mara already had the map in her hand. Yes. If we do not go to pick up Echo, Ross looked up sharply. That leaves our exfil plan dead. It leaves the plan outdated, Mara said. Not dead. She drew 3 fast lines in the dust. Pump station, East Cache, a dry wadi system running southeast toward a disused smuggler track. We move 9 kilometers east through low cuts and broken scrub. No ridges. Less visibility. The cache sits under a limestone overhang. If the transfer happens on their schedule, we intercept in 12 minutes if we move now and cut the second wadi. If we go to Echo, they disappear, and the hollow becomes the whole day. Ortega shifted the gun on his shoulder. What are we intercepting? Unknown. But not trivial. Nobody spends 7 rifles protecting junk. Mercer looked at Vance. Vance looked at the team. Tired, dust gray, adrenaline crashing but not gone, all still functional. Water check, Vance said. They checked? Ammunition. Reported. Mobility. All green. Then Vance turned to Mara. Route. She nodded once and started moving. No one questioned it. The country east of Widow's Hollow lacked the grandeur of the basin. It was meaner in smaller ways. Dry cuts, knife grass, limestone shelves that broke under bad foot placement and held under good. The team moved through it at a pace just below reckless, each man carrying the fresh memory of the hollow and the colder understanding that surviving the trap only mattered if they used the survival correctly. The desert had no mechanism to account for preparation. It had one for punishment. Men either matched the land's demands exactly, or the land took payment through delay, noise, injury, and exposure. There was no middle register. Mara led from 2 positions back rather than point. Ross still held navigation because the team functioned best when roles remained roles, but she fed him corrections before he asked for them. 30 meters left at the dead tamarisk. Not the first cut, the second. Or, stay off the pale stone, it rings under weight. Or, we crest that lip one at a time. Skyline here carries for 600. Each direction arrived without theater, and before the mistake it prevented had time to be made. That was how hidden expertise often looks in the field. Not brilliance, reduced friction. At the second wadi, cut, Kim slowed just enough to match her stride. Back there, he said quietly. You said shelf holds if they panic. She glanced at him. He had seen the notebook at the rock. Yes. You planned for our fear. I planned for physics under stress. He considered that, then nodded once. Same thing, sometimes. She did not answer, which Kim took as agreement. They reached the limestone overhang with 6 minutes, maybe less, before the transfer line on the recovered impression. The site was better concealed than the pump station, and worse defended than Widow's Hollow, which made sense. The hollow had been the shield. The cache was supposed to exist unnoticed behind it. Mara studied the ground from a low rise through glass. 2 pickup trucks tucked under netting. 4 armed men visible, one working a hard case on the tailgate of the rear truck, another checking watches too often. A 5th man hidden or absent. No women, no children, no camp sprawl. This was transit, not residence. The hard case was short, dense, and double-latched. Not money, not papers, too carefully handled for ammunition. Relay package, Vance said. Or trigger assembly, Mara said. Either way, it does not leave. Vance considered the site for all of 3 seconds. Then he split the team with clean economy. Mercer with me left. Pike and Hanley right, Ortega center support. Kim with Mara. Ross hold rear cut and watch the trucks. We take them on sync, no warnings. If someone reaches the case, break the pattern and stop him. He looked at Mara as he said it. Not for permission, for calibration. She gave the smallest nod. Sound. The assault lasted 19 seconds. Mercer and Vance cut the left pair before either man cleared the overhang shadow. Pike and Hanley collapsed the right side in a crossing angle that left one hostile spinning down beside the truck tire. Ortega's opening burst shattered the tailgate and pinned the case handler to the bed rail. Kim dropped to a knee beside Mara and fed her range and movement with almost preternatural steadiness while she held the rear seam where the 5th man should have emerged, if he existed. He did. Late, fast, smarter than the others. He came from a drainage slit behind the overhang with a compact rifle and immediately ignored the gunfire in front of him. He sprinted for the hard case, not cover, the case. Mara shot him through the thigh at 12 meters. He went down hard, reached anyway, and got a second round through the wrist for the effort. Then, the sight was done. Dust settled. A truck engine ticked once as hot metal cooled. Ortega covered the slit. Hanley cleared the overhang. Mercer rolled the wounded runner onto his back and stripped a small radio beacon from the inside of his vest. The hard case sat half off the tailgate, one latch broken by gunfire. Ross called from the rear cut. No vehicles inbound. Vance climbed onto the truck bed and checked the case. Inside lay a compact relay unit, code sheets, cache bundles, and a narrow foam slot holding 6 microdrives sealed in plastic. Intelligence. Not glamorous, not cinematic. The kind of thing wars quietly lean on. Kim whistled under his breath once and stopped. Mara looked at the beacon Mercer had found. That's the second threat. Mercer held it up. A red diode blinked at a steady interval. Tracker or call-out, he said. Both, likely. Vance looked from the beacon to the ridgeline east of the wadi. How long? Mara checked the model. If they paired it to a reaction team, under 20 minutes from activation if one was staged nearby. Less if the hollow failed, and this was their true priority. Pike wiped dust from his mouth with the back of his glove. Can't we just kill it? You can, Kim said, already reading the side panel. But if we hard kill the signal, they know the site is blown. If we let it run, they walk onto us. Mercer's eyes narrowed. And if we spoof it? Kim looked at him, then at Mara. Mara answered first. Can you? Kim's fingers were already on the casing. Maybe. Maybe is enough, she said. The loyalty of the silent ally arrived there, not as sentiment, but as precision under pressure. Kim opened the beacon with a multi-tool, clipped one lead, jumped another, and used the relay unit's own battery to loop the outgoing ping through a static interval profile. To anyone reading it from distance, the beacon would appear stationary, alive, and untroubled. To the team, it bought shape. He closed the casing, set it under the truck's axle where signal could bleed just enough, and looked at Mara. Stationary? He said. Alive. Not smart enough to notice itself. She nodded once. Good work. No one else in that unit would have done that as quickly or as cleanly. Vance made the next choice without hesitation. We leave the beacon. We take the drives. We stage the site for 2 extra bodies and 1 panicked survivor. Then we pull 70 meters west and build a pocket. Mara looked at him. This time, her nod carried something more than calibration, recognition returning. The reaction team arrived in 14 minutes. 4 men on 2 dirt bikes and 1 pickup, moving harder than caution should have allowed. They had come expecting continuity, not silence arranged by an enemy who could think like they did. They dismounted into the overhang site at speed, one man already calling out to the false stationary beacon signal, another moving toward the truck bed where the case had been. They found the arranged bodies. They found one living captive, exactly where Mercer had left him bound and groaning. They found what looked like disorganized aftermath. Then Mara gave the signal with a closed fist, opening once. Ortega's burst took the pickup windshield and driver. Pike and Hanley folded the bike pair at the left flank. Vance dropped the man on the truck bed as he turned toward the wrong sound. Mercer shot the last man through the side of the engine block he had chosen for cover, because he had not known Mercer could see the angle. The engagement was over before the Echo had decided which wall to return from. Pike breathed out and looked toward the low rise where Mara and Kim were still covering the seam. This is what you meant by one answer already calculated. She kept her rifle up a moment longer. Yes. No one smiled. The work had not earned that kind of waste. But something in the team had aligned. By the time they reached the eventual extraction site, a flat stretch of old smuggler track south of the wadis, the sun had gone lower, and the heat had thinned into a more dangerous kind of cold. Fatigue sat heavier now. Adrenaline no longer disguised weight. Even success has mass when men must carry it out with rifles, evidence, bodies, and the awareness of how near the first plan had come to catastrophe. The helicopter came in black against the evening and flared over the track in a storm of dust. They loaded in practiced sequence. Ortega fed the evidence bags to Kim before climbing aboard himself. Mercer helped Ross with the hard case, then swung in last. Vance remained on the ground until everyone else was in. Old habit. Good one. Mara was about to step onto the skid when Mercer touched 2 fingers to the outside of her forearm. Years ago, he said, voice nearly lost in rotor wash, I saw one like you early and spoke too late. She waited. I won't do that twice. That was all. She climbed in. The return flight was quieter than the outbound had been. Not because the noise was less, but because everyone on board had spent enough of themselves to stop filling space unnecessarily. Pike cleaned dust from the front sight he had barely used in the hollow. Ortega checked the feed tray twice, then rested. Ross finally flushed his eye with saline and blinked against the sting. Hanley sat with both hands clasped over his gloves as if keeping them from opening on their own. Kim held the evidence case with the microdrives braced between his boots and watched the relay unit logs scroll across his tablet, preserving everything. Mercer looked out the open side and measured the fading land. Vance sat opposite Mara, forearms on knees, helmet hanging loose from one hand. 3 times he looked as if he might speak. 3 times he did not. The base lights were up when they landed. Debriefs began before boots had cooled. That was appropriate. Official truth grows weaker every minute memory is allowed to edit it. The team moved from the flight line to the secure after-action room, still carrying dust in the seams of their uniforms. Evidence tables had already been laid out. A recorder sat live, An operations lawyer waited at the far wall with a legal pad. Two intelligence officers stood near the projector, eyes moving too quickly over the hard case and the microdrives to hide their interest. The formal debrief was chaired by Group Captain Naomi Surratt, theater liaison for Joint Special Operations in the district, a woman with silver beginning at the temples and the posture of someone who had learned long ago that authority is best spent in measured denominations. She knew Vance by record and Mercer by reputation. She knew Mara Vale only by the assignment sheet that had attached her to the element as technical support pending review. That assignment sheet was about to die. Surratt began cleanly. Official after-action record. Contact at Widow's Hollow, followed by interdiction east of objective site. This record will capture sequence, command decisions, evidence recovery, casualties, and any deviations from planned procedure. Lieutenant Commander Vance, start from departure. Vance did. He gave the route, the insertion, the initial plan, the descent. Then, at the point where the basin opened and the first concerns had been raised, he stopped looking at the tabletop and looked directly at Surratt. Before first contact, he said, Attached Specialist Vale identified the basin as a probable multi-rifle ambush site, recommended delay or split approach, and produced a terrain overlay predicting 7 firing positions and an eastern dead ground egress. I evaluated the concern. I did not alter the plan. The recorder lights stayed red. The room stayed quiet. Vance continued. No self-protection, no theatrical remorse. Just record. First contact confirmed her prediction nearly exactly. Once pinned, Vale identified active rifle positions under fire, prevented a command kill from the eastern shelf, exposed a concealed south lip exit shooter before he fired into our displacement, and assumed tactical control of the valley when I determined she had pre-built a viable counter-ambush solution superior to my current picture. He paused once, not because he was uncertain, because accuracy deserved the beat. The valley did not collapse because of me. It did not collapse despite me. It collapsed because she had already done the thinking, and I recognized it in time to get out of her way. No one at the table wrote for 3 full seconds. Then, pens started. Pike sat very still to Mara's right. Ross looked down at his hands. Kim's expression did not change, but his shoulders loosened a fraction. Surratt said, You're stating for the record that command of the engagement shifted. Yes. Formally, yes. Why? Because the best available tactical authority was not wearing the rank I had assumed authority belonged to in that moment. That sentence settled over the room with a weight larger than its length. Mercer gave his account next. He corroborated the pre-drawn sectors, the route card, the credentials reveal, the transition of control, the silent shelf movement, the western collapse, and the recovery of the impressed writing at the pump station. Then Kim was asked to speak on the relay beacon and drone support. He did so in the exact clipped language of a man who had never wasted syllables for style. Vale called for orbit tightening before the feed loss cycle became operationally significant. She used the freeze frame to confirm the east notch. At the cache site, she assessed the beacon as dual purpose. I looped the output because she asked whether it could be done instead of assuming it could not. Surratt looked at him. Could it have been done without that prompt? Kim considered. Not by me at that speed. Again, he said no more than needed. Again, it mattered. Pike's turn came. He sat forward. Forearms on the table, knuckles scraped, wrist bandaged under fresh tape where the basin stone had taken skin. In another type of story, this would have been the apology scene. The lesser version, the version built from emotion instead of structure. That was not what happened here. In the pre-mission brief, Pike said, Vale raised terrain-based concerns I did not understand because I was reading the problem inside my competence range. I treated that misunderstanding like certainty and dismissed her publicly. In the basin, she preserved my life at least twice, maybe more depending on how far back you count. I want the record to reflect that the error was mine at the point of evaluation, not hers at the point of communication. Surratt asked, Anything further? Pike looked once at Mara, then back at the recorder. Yes, when the moment came, she did not hold my error against the mission. That distinction belongs in here too. That was accountability. No self-cleansing, no plea for absolution, just a man placing his mistake where it could be seen and measured. The debrief ran another 83 minutes. Evidence was catalogued. 7 rifles, 7 positions, 1 relay case, 6 microdrives, 1 recovered body priority sketch, proving command target sequencing, 1 reconstructed transfer note leading to the cache interdiction. No friendly fatalities, minor fragment wounds only. Enemy casualties totaled 16 across both sites. At the end, Surratt removed her glasses, looked down at the provisional assignment sheet in front of her, then at the black sleeve now lying beside it. "I need the full administrative file for Vale," she said. The adjutant at the wall hesitated. "MAAM. That file requires—" "I know what it requires." The room did not move. Surratt held out her hand. "Bring it." It took 12 minutes. During those 12 minutes, the team was dismissed for medical checks and gear turn-in, but no one went far. Some records deserve witnesses simply by the gravity they exert. When the file arrived, it came in a thicker folder than the one Mara had carried into the basin. Surratt opened it alone at first. The room changed by degrees as she read. "Pending review" became the least interesting line in the document. There were prior assignments nested under layered clearances, counter-sniper advisories attached to theaters no one in the room had known she had entered, an earlier recommendation for transfer that had been paused not by disciplinary failure, but by institutional caution. There were commendations not public enough to circulate, and objections bureaucratic enough to delay what field performance had already settled. There was also, near the center, the answer to the quiet question several people had been carrying since the Ridge: why someone with this file was standing in a support slot on Vance's line. Surratt read that page twice. Then she closed the folder with 2 fingers and looked at Mara across the table. "For the record," she said, "this assignment was not punitive. No, not a demotion. No, a negotiated placement pending review of an interagency dispute over control authorities and doctrinal ownership." "Yes." Surratt's mouth flattened. "That is a very polite way to describe a stupid argument." The room almost smiled. Vance did not. He was still looking at the file. Surratt turned it toward him. "Read." He did. The team had known by now that Mara was more than the patch she wore. The file clarified how much more. Years built in low-signature Overwatch units, cross-qualification with targeteering cells, a training accident on another continent that had led to an unauthorized deviation from protocol, technically correct in result and procedurally inconvenient in review. One senior board wanting to preserve chain integrity by slowing her ascent, another wanting her reassigned before a less flexible command structure blunted a tool it did not understand. The negotiated arrangement had placed her temporarily in the field under reduced visibility while a review board argued over ownership. No punishment, no fall from grace. Delay, dressed in paperwork. Vance finished the last page and closed the file carefully. When he spoke, his voice had none of the command floor cadence left in it. This was smaller, more exact. "I didn't look at you," he said. "I looked at a file." Mara met his gaze. "That happens. That isn't an excuse." "No?" He nodded once. "No." There were other conversations after that. Smaller, private in corners of a very public machine. Mercer found Mara outside medical after the corps man had cleaned the fragment nick on her neck and told her not to dignify it with concern. The night had gone cold. Floodlights turned the packed dirt white. Beyond the wire, the dark hills had resumed their old indifference. Mercer stood beside her without crowding. For a while, both watched a forklift move ammunition pallets between bays. "I had a corporal once," he said. "Too young for the room, too right for it. I recognized the pattern and still let the room run over him because I thought there would be time to fix it after." He scratched once at the edge of his beard. There wasn't. Mara waited. "I protected you late today," he said. "Later than I should have. Earlier than last time." She looked out toward the hills. "Earlier counts." Mercer nodded. "It does." That was his acknowledgement. Practical, buried in history, earned. Pike waited until she was alone by the gear cage before approaching. He carried her recovered acetate overlay in a clear evidence sleeve the intel officers had already copied. "I asked for this back from them," he said. "Didn't feel right letting a room of clean boots keep it." She took the sleeve. He looked at the 7 circles. In the basin, when you told me to show shoulder, I did it because Mercer told me to. The second time I did it because you did." He let the statement hang, then added, "I'll be better next time at knowing the difference before the bullets." That was his form of accountability. Forward-facing, not ornamental. Mara inclined her head. "Good." He almost said more. Didn't. Better. Kim found her last, though he had been nearest her all day. He stood in the comms bay doorway with the relay beacon body in one hand and his tablet in the other. Fluorescent light flattened his features and made him look even quieter than he was. "I pulled the beacon logs," he said. "Reaction team was 23 minutes from standby when it armed. Your estimate was right." "Copy." He held up the beacon shell. "I archived the loop profile. If anyone wants to know how it stayed alive while dead, I can show them." She nodded once. "Keep it." Kim's eyes flicked to her, then down. "Shelf holds, if they panic." They were her exact words, from the notebook. Not a question, not admiration. Receipt. "Yes," she said. He gave one small nod and left. Ross's acknowledgement was awkward, which made it honest. He caught her near the water point, shifted his weight twice, then blurted, "I kept thinking if you hadn't had that route, I'd have moved us center because it looked faster." He scrubbed at his face with a hand still marked by map ink. "I just thought you should know I know that." Mara said, "Now you do." He exhaled. The relief in that was not forgiveness, it was clarity. Hanley's was simpler still. He walked by with a fresh roll of tape and set a spare smoke can on the bench beside her without comment. One hand to the can, 2 fingers tapped its side. Then he kept moving. In units like this, the language of trust is often logistical. The formal institutional recognition arrived 3 hours later on a secure terminal in Surratt's office, which she insisted Mara witness in person. The message came stamped with enough classification markings to make the screen look armored. It was not poetic. Bureaucracy never is. But truth sometimes arrives through dry channels. Review complete. Interim status revoked. Prior restrictions lifted effective immediately. Attached authority restored. Field commendation submitted by Lieutenant Commander Elias Vance and Senior Chief Eli Mercer entered into permanent record. Recommendation for direct operational placement. Counter-sniper and terrain exploitation cell approved. Surratt read it once, then turned the monitor slightly so Mara could see the final line. Authority restored. Concrete, not implied. Surratt leaned back in her chair. "There it is." Mara read the line, without visible reaction. Surratt watched her a moment, then said, "You might consider the courtesy of appearing slightly vindicated." "I was busy." That pulled the smallest laugh from Surratt the room had probably heard all month. "Fair enough," Surratt said. Then she sobered. "Why did you agree to the reduced placement?" Mara looked at the dark window beyond the terminal, where her reflection sat faint over the night. "Because the board wanted me behind a desk while they argued. I told them I'd take field attachment under review instead. If they were going to decide what to do with me, they could do it while I was still useful." Surratt was quiet for a beat. "And the other reason." There was always another reason when competent people accept less visible ground than they could claim. Mara answered without ceremony. "My mentor died waiting on a committee to finish being careful. I don't wait well." Surratt took that in and did not soften it with sympathy. Good leaders know pity is sometimes just disrespect in formal clothes. "Understood," she said. Vance was outside the office when Mara stepped into the corridor. He had removed his body armor hours earlier, but the red marks from the shoulder straps still crossed his uniform shirt. Fatigue had found his face at last. Not enough to reduce him, enough to make him more fully readable. "Walk with me," he said. They went out past the lit bays and the parked vehicles to the edge of the compound, where the wire fence looked toward the dark land beyond. No one else followed. Some conversations still know how to protect themselves. For a while he said nothing. The night gave them generator hum, distant rotor maintenance, and the dry rattle of something loose against a flagpole. "When I took command of that element," he said, "I made myself a rule. Never let experience harden into certainty faster than the environment can correct it." He folded his arms, then unfolded them. "Today I broke my own rule." Mara stood with hands behind her back, looking through the wire at the shape of the hills. "You corrected." Late. In time? He let that sit. That doesn't erase the first part. No? Another silence. I read the full file, he said. Yes. There's enough in it to put you in charge of rooms that would never have admitted you to the door on the paperwork I saw. Yes. And yet you came into mine, took the assignment, carried the support slot, and said almost nothing. There was work? He turned toward her then. Why didn't you force the issue in the brief? She considered the question as if it deserved a clean answer, and not a quick one. Because men who force authority before the environment confirms it spend half their time defending the force instead of solving the problem. And because, if your judgment had held, I needed the team trusting you more than me until it changed. The answer struck him harder than accusation would have. He looked away first, out to the dark hills. That's an expensive kind of patience. It is. You always pay it. No? What changes it? Mara's gaze remained on the wire, on the dark beyond. Body count. Vance let out a long breath that was nearly a laugh, and not close at all. Understood. He was quiet another moment. Then he said, the thing he had come out there to say, stripped to the frame. I did not fail because I lacked courage. I failed because I accepted a smaller picture than the terrain was offering me. You enlarged it. That belongs to your record and mine. It already does. Yes, he nodded. It does. That was his acknowledgement. Precise. No performance. Back in the barracks row, Pike sat alone on an ammo crate, cleaning dust from a magazine spring that did not need cleaning. Mara would have passed him without stopping if he had not stood. One thing, he said. She waited. In the room, before the flight, when you laid that overlay down, were you trying to convince us? No. Then what? Preserve the chain. He frowned. I don't need everyone to believe me, she said. I need the record to remember I spoke before the ground did. Pike absorbed that slowly, then nodded once, harder than necessary, as if pinning the idea down. I'll remember that longer than the valley, he said. Good, she said, and kept walking. The base quieted by increments after midnight. Doors closed. Engines wound down. A few lights remained where watchstanders and maintenance crews kept the machinery of war from pretending it ran on heroism instead of tired professionals with clipboards and wrenches. Mara returned to the outer yard where she had sat before dawn. The upturned water can was still there beside the Hesco wall. The air was colder now, the red security bulb above the corner post dimmer than it had seemed in the morning. Her gear was stacked in order at her feet, cleaned enough for the night and not yet reconfigured for the next movement. She sat. From a cargo pocket she removed the small waterproof notebook, the same one that had carried 7 circles and a sentence about panic, the same one that had lain open under rifle fire while men on the ridges tried to close a system by killing its right joints. She turned back through the pages. Wind notes, ridge lines, 2 numbers crossed out, a quick sketch of the East Cache overhang, Kim's Beacon Loop interval, a single line from long before this valley, written in another hand on a page she had never torn out. The mountain doesn't care about courage. It only cares about angle. Her mentor's script. Block letters. No signature. She uncapped her pencil and looked out beyond the wire where the first hills rose dark and featureless against a lighter band of sky. Somewhere past them, Widow's Hollow had returned to stone, shadow, and wind. The bodies would cool. The hides would collapse under weather and scavengers and time. The basin would not remember that 7 rifles had once waited there. Landscapes do not keep faith with human consequence. They simply remain available for the next test. That was one of the reasons professionals respected them. Indifference is cleaner than sentiment. It cannot flatter. It cannot lie. Mara lowered the pencil to the page. She wrote one word. Saying. Then she closed the notebook, tapped the spine twice, and sat with the cold a little longer while the mountains held their lines beyond the wire, unchanged, exact, and waiting.